Reporters David Heath and Hal Burnton have come to a tiny Washington town in pursuit of a big story.
My name is David Heath. I'm a reporter with the Seattle Times. I'm working on a story about you can't talk to the media. Okay. So you don't talk to the media?
Heath and Burnton are here in Bremerton, following a money trail, chasing down what are known as earmarks, the federal dollars that members of Congress slip into spending bills, often at the last minute, usually to benefit individuals, companies, or institutions in their state or district.
And what was it for? What was it for? They spent $1 million to lobby. What?
Earmarks are a perfectly legal form of political pork, and nearly everyone in Congress sponsors them. But as these reporters have learned, they're not always easy to track.
Oh, I missed it.
Recalculating.
Are you sure that's the right address? 286 4th?
286 4th Street.
Heath and Burnton work for the Seattle Times.
They're building on the floodplain, but they're building 10 feet higher than everybody else.
With 9 full-time investigative reporters and editors, this mid-sized daily has built an outsized reputation as a tough watchdog.
And is there a pattern here in Washington?
There is a skepticism to these people, but it's not a cynicism.
Missouri.
Yeah,
but if
that's
it's in their own
easy.
hometown, it's
This entire group has both intense passion and childlike curiosity about nearly everything they encounter.
Who else has got news for us, or what's other folks up to?
I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma. I was a reporter there, and we covered the local school board. And it's pretty straightforward. If you're an elected official and you are making decisions, you should be able to justify what you're doing. It's not supposed to be corrupt. It's not supposed to be about cronyism. It's not supposed to be about favoritism. So I came at this story with a certain naivete, a certain belief that the world is supposed to make sense.
In the fall of 2006, the world wasn't making sense for David Heath.
I was watching a documentary called Why We Fight.
Is felt in every city, every state house.
Eisenhower is giving his farewell address to the nation.
We recognize the imperative need for this.
And he's warning the nation about this new military-industrial complex.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
Eisenhower's words haunted the reporter.
There were a lot of scandals going on at the time. You had a congressman in San Diego, Duke Cunningham, who was taking bribes.
Concealed my conduct and disgraced my office.
You had a notorious lobbyist who's now serving prison time.
Washington lobbyist Jack Abramoff pleaded guilty today in a major investigation of influence peddling. He appeared in federal court in Seattle this year.
And in my neck of the woods in Seattle, there was a scandal that had gone on involving Boeing.
Last week, on the heels of serious ethics violations, Boeing Chief Financial Officer Michael Sears was fired. This week,
in each of these cases, a crime occurred. People went to jail. But every year, private interests donate millions of dollars to congressional campaigns, and Congress doles out tens of billions in earmarks. And it's all business as usual.
Sometimes you have scandals where you have a congressman taking bribes, and you think, okay, well, that was a bad actor. The question is that all there is, or is this something bigger that's going on? Is there something wrong with the whole culture?
To try to answer that question, Heath would ultimately have to leave the comfortable terrain of the state of Washington for the backroom dealings of that other Washington. But first, he would do some reporting with his computer. A specialist in data analysis, he decided to home in on Congress's 2007 defense spending bill, all $400 billion of it. His plan seemed simple. He'd create a database jammed with everything he could find on the bill's earmarks. He just needed to get the list of them. But there was no list to be found.
They're literally hidden. I mean, they're not in the bill. They're not in the defense bill. And I finally had to call an expert, a guy named Winslow Wheeler, and ask him, where are these earmarks anyway? How do you find them?
Few understand earmarks better than Winslow Wheeler. The former Capitol Hill staffer spent more than 30 years serving powerful senators from both parties, often helping to craft earmarks for his bosses.
If you look at a Department of Defense appropriations bill, you'll not find very much pork in it. What you need to do is look at the committee report. 99% of the pork is in the committee report, not in the statute.
That is the conference committee report. Before a bill is passed, both houses meet in conference. It's there that they hammer out all their differences, and they finalize their earmarks. When Heath found the 2007 Defense Appropriations Conference Committee report online, he struck gold. 2,700 earmarks, worth nearly $12 billion. Now it was simply a matter of transferring the earmarks into his own database. He'd get some assistance from 2 college interns.
I think a lot of people just think of, when they think of investigative reporters, they think of, Woodward and Bernstein and hiding in the shadows and trying to.
And those are some of the things that we'd see in our classes.
Yeah, and it's really tedious, long hours at a computer, at a phone, working, and it's not exactly it's not what you think at all, and it's way harder than you think.
In fact, deciphering Congress's earmarks proved nearly impossible.
So they'd actually taken simple text and then they shrunk it down, tiny little type.
You couldn't copy and paste any of the information into the database.
And on top of that, the earmarks themselves are in language that's like code.
$4 million is just an example for NG4BW. And you're like, what?
Prop X subsonar water system. And what's that?
Advanced Hypersonic Weapon BMC2 hardware in the loop HWIL technology demonstration. That's the title. You can understand that easily, right?
It was like they had hired a consultant to figure out how to make this as hard as possible.
Winslow Wheeler told Heath that to unscramble the earmarks, he should take advantage of Congress's penchant for self-promotion.
A lot of these members of Congress put out press releases that delineate the pork they've added to the various bills. And in there, you can probably find out who the manufacturer is. You can get, rather than 3 words to describe it, you can get maybe 3 sentences. And you start unraveling the string.
There's 535 members of Congress. And I had to go through their individual websites and basically spend all that time hunting through their websites for that press release about their earmarks. I got to know by the end of the process the name of every single company that got an earmark. There was a company that sells shock absorbers had gotten an earmark. There was an eye doctor, one-man shop that had gotten an earmark.
It took Heath and his team months of full-time work, but in the end, they had produced an unprecedented database containing a list of all the earmarks in the defense bill, the congressional sponsors, and the private sector recipients. They also added information on 6 years' worth of campaign contributions made by those earmark recipients, plus data on the millions they spent lobbying Congress.
For lobbying expenses, they'd spent in 2006 alone, 1 year, $160 million lobbying Congress. Big money. But they got $12 billion in earmarks.
But unless a bribe can be proven, earmarks aren't illegal. And for all David Heath knew, they might well be critical to the nation's defense. To find out, Heath would look into what taxpayers were buying with all that earmarked money. The Seattle Times is a local newspaper. Heath started with earmarks initiated by Pacific Northwest members of Congress.
The earmarks that I ended up picking, it was almost like throwing darts. The first one I started off with was with a company called Microvision.
Seattle's Microvision Corporation produced a high-tech device called the Nomad. The helmet-mounted computer display hangs in front of a soldier's eye and projects battlefield maps onto his field of vision. The Nomad, Heath learned, was earmarked again and again. 2001, $8 million to develop the device. Among the sponsors, Washington Republican Senator Slade Gorton. 2 years later, after being defeated for re-election, Gorton joined the Microvision board. 2004, $5.5 million to buy Nomads. The sponsor, Washington Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat. When Heath cross-checked that earmark with campaign contributions to Murray, he found this.
Microvision executives had all in one day given Patty Murray a large donation, and then a month later, Senator Murray announced that she was getting an earmark for the company.
And the senator wasn't done earmarking the Microvision device. In 2005, there was another $6 million for more Nomads, nearly 1,600 of them. Heath had followed the money, but now it was time to talk to those who would use the Nomad, Stryker Brigade soldiers stationed at a local base. His editor, Jim Neff, called in some backup from the paper's specialist in military affairs, Hal Burnton.
And Hal knew people at the base. He had reported on the Stryker Brigade. He had been embedded with them in Iraq. So what better reporter in the country, actually in the world, to have investigate the Nomad than Hal Burton?
I really approached it with a pretty open mind. If they were using it and it was working, fine, I would tell David that.
But they were not using the Nomad in combat. The Army had concluded it was distracting to wear and caused a blind spot. One Iraq vet, retired Command Sergeant Major Thomas Adams, put it bluntly.
He said, "It's junk."
He actually told David and I at one point that most of them had just ended up in a warehouse.
I was shocked. I mean, it was like, I have to admit, not only was I shocked, but there was also kind of this rush that you get when you're an investigative reporter and you realize, oh my God, can you believe this? I mean, they're selling a product to the military that they're not even using.
And there was more. The reporters found a press release from defense contractor Rockwell Collins. The company was trumpeting a contract it had gotten for its own helmet-mounted display. The Rockwell Collins device had beaten out rivals in an Army-staged evaluation. Among the defeated, Microvision's Nomad. Heath was keeping a running timeline. He entered the date of the Rockwell Collins announcement. Something jumped off the screen.
Rockwell Collins makes this announcement that they won the contract on a particular day. And the next day, Patty Murray announces that she's getting a huge earmark for this Nomad being produced by Microvision.
It was that $6 million earmark, the Times would report, for almost 1,600 Nomads.
When I saw that Senator Murray awarded an earmark after the Nomad had lost this competition, I wondered, did she know that? Was she aware of it? If she wasn't aware of it, it seemed like she should have been. If she was aware of it, why would she do it? It just raised more questions.
The database became sort of the base for all of our inquiries. Now there was that list that I couldn't find before. We had made it. So now I could go through methodically and start looking at each one. T-shirts. Oh, well, let's take a look at that.
InSport is an athletic apparel company. They make T-shirts. Vital Apparel is their parent company.
In 2005, David Wu was among a group of Northwest legislators sponsoring a $2 million earmark for T-shirts to be worn by Marines as undergarments in combat. That same year, on a trip to Iraq, the Oregon congressman was promoting the shirts, handing them out for free to Marines. The earmark specified that the shirts be purchased from a Portland area company called InSport. Executives of InSport and its parent company would become Wu campaign contributors.
And as you can see, they gave substantial campaign contributions to David Wu in early 2006.
The T-shirts were made of polyester, but polyester shirts have a potentially dangerous flaw, demonstrated to Heath and Exposé by one of InSport's competitors.
I'm going to light the polyester with a simple lighter flame here, which will ignite the fabric, the fiber itself. The problem with these fibers is these are made from chemicals, and the chemicals are based in oil. And as soon as there's heat to them, flame, which of course everybody is experiencing in the war now in Iraq and Afghanistan with explosions, the polyester will literally melt into plastic and stick to your skin. It's basically hard.
Oh, yeah.
And that brittleness right there, that hardness is what would be on your skin, stuck to your skin.
The military has known of the danger for over 20 years. And a Marine in Iraq was severely burned when his polyester T-shirt melted following an explosion. The reporters couldn't confirm who manufactured the shirt. As a result of the incident, in April 2006, the Marines banned the use of all polyester T-shirts in combat. Yet 3 months later, because of the earmark, the Marines bought 87,000 of them from InSport, along with 11,000 T-shirts with fire-resistant sleeves. But even these, they wouldn't trust in battle.
The Marines were telling me that this product still wasn't certified for use outside the wire, that it wasn't something that could be used on combat missions.
2 months after that, Wu and his colleagues inserted another $1 million earmark for more InSport shirts.
So I was trying to figure out, why were they giving them another $1 million if they still didn't have a product that could work?
And then, interestingly, the day the bill passed, the next day he got another campaign contribution from InSport, and within 3 weeks he'd gotten a couple more. That just seems surreal.
With that last $1 million, the Marines bought shirts from InSport that had not specifically been named in the earmark, flame-resistant fleeces. For Burnton and Heath, there were more earmarks to examine. In 2001, Senator Patty Murray put a $4.65 million earmark into the Coast Guard budget for this patrol boat. But, the Times would report, the Coast Guard hadn't asked for the boat. Not all in Congress were supportive.
And there's only one company in the country which produces such a vessel, and it just happens to be Guardian Marine International, located in Edmonds, Washington. Not only did the United States Coast Guard not ask for this vessel, they looked at the Guardian vessel, considered its merits, and concluded that it would not adequately meet the Coast Guard's needs. Taxpayers of America, look at the Guardian fast patrol craft, which will be yours, whether the Coast Guard wants it or not.
The Coast Guard didn't want it, and so it ended up here, where David Heath tracked it down, navigating the San Francisco Bay. It now belongs to a local county sheriff's office.
September 30th, 2005 was the day we picked up the boat from the Coast Guard station over here. We paid $1 for this boat, and I don't think we actually paid $1, but it was turned over to us.
As the Times would discover, Murray, with Washington Congressmen Norm Dix and Brian Baird, would sponsor millions in earmarks for 3 patrol boats for the Navy as well. None are being used as the earmarks directed. 2 have been shuttled off to military research facilities. And the third boat?
It turns out that the Navy gave the boat away to the University of Washington before the boat was even launched.
It was moored right here. We informed the Navy this isn't something that works for us, and what do you want to do?
The boat sat idle for more than a year, then was transferred to a branch of the National Weather Service in Vancouver, Washington. When the reporters followed the money, they found campaign contributions from the boat's builders to legislators who sponsored the earmarks. David Heath had begun his investigation with a question. Beyond the congressional lawbreakers, the bribe takers, the bad actors, is there something bigger going on?
This is not about an aberration. This is about a culture. This is about a system that's doing this. It's not just a bad congressman.
After nearly a year's painstaking work, it was time for Mr. Heath to go to Washington. In the fall of 2007, Heath journeyed to the nation's capital and sat down to interview Senator Patty Murray and Congressman Norm Dix. Both defended their earmarks and denied any wrongdoing.
There's never, ever been any quid pro quo. You know, people, if they want to support me, they support me. If they don't want to support me, I still might do their earmark. I mean, because if I thought it was a worthy project, if we went to a system where you couldn't take a campaign contribution, then you would only be able to get, the only people you could get money from are people that you never helped.
Senator Murray told Heath that her earmarks gave Washington state businesses a fair shot at federal dollars.
People tend to talk about earmarks as something that is a bad thing. I see it as a way to make sure that the tax dollars that are spent in a very wise way and help our state economically.
When pressed specifically on the problems Heath had uncovered with the Nomad, Murray admitted things don't always turn out well.
I wish every single dollar that I put into any project was 1,000% successful. It's unfortunate that there is one that isn't working well, and nobody regrets it more than I do. None of us bat 1,000, and obviously this one didn't, or potentially hasn't, and we'll just keep trying to get as close to 1,000 as we can. That's what my job is.
It's our job to hold our delegation accountable, no matter what we think of them, good, bad, or indifferent.
The Seattle Times owner and publisher Frank Blethyn and the paper's editorial board are big boosters of Senator Patty Murray and other legislators the paper reported on, and have publicly endorsed them for office. But the Times has made its name investigating any and all subjects.
We have taken on virtually every sacred cow in Seattle, from the University of Washington Huskies football team to Nordstrom, which was one of our largest advertisers, to the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, which was probably the most sacred of cows in this community.
We consider Patty Murray a friend, and we have great respect and admiration for Patty, but we did the story anyway.
The Times did the story in the fall of 2007. The earmarks, the campaign contributions, the money spent on products the military didn't want or couldn't use, and the response from the legislators. And on its website, the paper has posted David Heath's one-of-a-kind database. Now anybody can find out about those 2,700 defense bill earmarks. And Heath is not stopping there. He's writing follow-up stories and creating an earmark database for all 2008 appropriations bills.
Sweet 8, yeah. My name is David Heath. I'm with the Seattle Times. I'm looking for a company that's...
I'm going to continue writing about earmarks.
They used to be in this location.
I think there's a lot of elements to this story that haven't been told yet, and I'm going to continue writing about it until we really understand what's going on.